So it was who I am and what I'm hoping to get out of the call, right?
Yep, you are. Yeah.
So my name's Alice Edwards. I try and go by Alice Vo Edwards, though, because there's other Alice Edwardses. So if I try and write research papers, it'll be confusing, right? If it's just Edwards, comma E or A. So I'm gonna use AV, comma, with it instead. And I'm getting my doctorate in industrial and organizational psychology, but my focus is really on like happiness, well-being, and reducing stress and reducing suicide ideologies and just helping people be happier and healthier. But I've worked in business for almost 20 years now, and my idea behind getting the doctorate in IO Psych is that there are so many opportunities to help people improve their well-being through preventative measures and training in the workplace that can impact their whole lives. So that's why I'm getting the IO Psych angle, because I feel like with my business background, I have a lot to add from an interdisciplinary perspective to how business incorporates psychology and well-being and preventative measures. So what I'm hoping to get out of this is I have one paper in peer review with my school currently, but me and my co-author, who already has her PhD in HR, I think we were rejected from like 2 or 3 other publishers before we got it to this stage. No, sorry, that's one paper. We didn't get it accepted at all. And then this other paper I'm doing through my school, and I feel like kind of my school's paper is easier to get accepted in. So I just think there's probably a lot I can learn about how to go about getting published to make it less hard on myself, because I still have a little bit of a thin skin. I know I've been told I need to work on developing a thicker skin because, peer review is hard and you're gonna get rejected often, etc. But like, it seems like a lot of work to like reformat a paper over and over again for 3 different publishers and keep hearing no with no like good feedback on why, when hopefully I can learn from this call how to be better at it, so that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
Welcome, Alice. I'm really excited that you joined the call. I'm looking forward to kind of having a conversation about some of the questions that you raised.
Thank you. My name is Chun. I'm a doctoral student in counseling psychology at Arizona State University. So the reason why I'm interested in this topic is actually similar to what Alice said, and I feel like maybe less personal experience, but also anecdotally, as graduate students, sometimes we collaborate with professors or co-authors, and I think sometimes it's difficult when we put a lot of efforts into writing an article, but because of the previous rejections or things like that, sometimes we get the message from our mentor that maybe this paper is not going to be published. Again, it's that management about what do we do with like our like academic baby, and it's not going to be like published in a journal after we put all of those efforts into. And it sounds like just anecdotally it happens not infrequently. So what can we do to navigate that as graduate students? So I just end with that.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Chan. I'm excited about the questions that you also raise too, and maybe when we have this conversation, folks would feel comfortable sharing a little bit more detail. I'll go ahead and just quickly introduce myself and then start to answer some of the questions that you all have. So as you know, my name is Helen Neville. I am professor in Psych and African American Studies at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. I think this is my 17th year here, and prior to that, I was at the University of Missouri Columbia for 9 years. I'm a counseling psychologist, and I am currently chairing the counseling psychology program, which is in the Department of Psych. In the past, in terms of, I've been associate editor of the Counseling Psychologist, associate editor of journal Black Psychology. I've done a lot of editing special issues or editing handbooks, etc., and doing some publishing. And some of the things in a variety of journals. And so I can really resonate with the whole notion of what it feels like to get rejection letters, and how you kind of power through that, how you regroup, how you can kind of get things published. So I want to walk through that. I have, unfortunately, lots of experiences with those rejections, especially earlier on. So the idea about the one issue is, how do you regroup after you get rejection? And I'd like to say, I know there was one article that I worked on, and I was a co-author on, and I swear we might have went to 4 or 5 journals before we got it accepted. So typically, unless there's a complete fatal flaw in your design, you will find a happy home for it. And so there's some things now, there's some things about how is it that you get work that you've already done published, and then how is it that you can have a better experience prior to submitting your next work. So I'll first tackle that first question about how is it to get stuff that you've already gotten rejected. So in terms of the rejections, it is incredibly hard. It's hard not to take it personally. Some of the things that I try to do is I try to file it away. I get a distance from it for about a week, so that I'm not, it's not raw. And then what I do is I just start to write down all of the I take emotions out of it, and I might just say, oh, they have no idea what they're talking about, oh, whatever, and I start then to write out, outline for myself all of the things that they've said that we need to improve on, without being too hard on myself. And even if initially I dismiss their feedback, what I've found is through the writing process that it actually makes sense, and it has improved the actual work. One of the things that, unless people are completely hostile, a friend of mine has really helped me frame some of these, the amount of feedback that I get. It's like she looks at it as love. These folks have taken time to look at your work and give you some feedback, and that's love in the sense it's going to help you move forward. So looking at the rejection, I try to think about, is there a fatal flaw in the design? Because if there's a fatal flaw, then that really means that you may or may not be able to get it published. And so that is something to be completely honest with yourself. And so if there's a fatal flaw, you might want to get with a group of folks to think about, can we use this as a first pilot study, and then have like a study 2 that addresses that fatal flaw, so that you're not just losing the data or whatever that you've done. The idea here too is not to feel as though that you are working in isolation, because I think sometimes when we work in isolation, we beat ourselves up. And what I also notice is that folks who are just starting off writing, when they get the feedback, they think only they get feedback. They assume that it has something to do with their skill level or whatever. And what I try to remind folks is that no matter how you are, you're always going to get feedback, and it's always going to be a lot of feedback. It's never where things are flawless from the get-go. That this is just part of the research process. So try not to internalize it as something unique to you. And what I have found is that the researchers that grow and develop and move on are the researchers who then seek feedback. And that's a really hard thing to do. So you have to let go of perfectionism. Even if you might be burning up inside, is to work on how can I get feedback? And if it's really hard for you to get the feedback, just ask people for the feedback, and don't feel like you need to respond. To say, okay, that's helpful. Let me make sure that I understand what you've said, and repeat what they've said, and just write it down before responding, and then just get to it when you feel like a little stronger. So in terms of what I think might be helpful too, in terms of these rejection, is to get yourself and your co-authors and an experienced and someone who's experienced at publishing, and to get them around a table to what you call kind of workshop the paper. And you'll say, here's a list of the feedback. They don't have to read all of the reviewer's comment. You can kind of create a table that lists out the comments and concerns. And then what you will do is you can even have a table that here's all the concerns. Here are the ways that I'm thinking that we could address the concerns, just in bulleted. And then you distribute that to people along with the manuscript in its current form. And then you workshop it. You know, here's, you know, what folks are saying. Here's some of my ideas about how we might respond. And then people can say yay or nay, that works, that doesn't work. You know, and so that would be, I think that's important. The idea here is to get, sometimes people are rejected. One, it's not a good fit for the journal. Two is that sometimes people, it might be a little bit more preliminary and people are trying to pitch it to the highest impact journal, when in fact maybe you need to pitch it to a journal that is a lower tier journal, just for the initial start. There could be some other political reason why things are rejected. And we can talk a little bit about that later on. So I think in terms of, those are some ways of handling rejections, and not, I wouldn't just automatically dismiss it and say you can't get it published, even if it's been rejected 3 times. I want to stop here and then get some comments and thoughts that you have now before getting to the next part of what I wanted to respond to. And the next part of what I wanted to respond to was, how is it that you can, what kinds of things can you do now before submitting your next manuscript? But this is for a study that's already in the making. But let me stop and ask, are there any thoughts or responses to what I've said so far?
Yes, I wrote pilot studies. How, if you realize that there was some kind of fatal flaw and you need to try and publish it as a pilot study, how do you go about doing that? And you mentioned that often with pilot studies, you need to go to journals that are less top tier. Is that what you said?
Yes. Okay. So the two kind of questions that you have is like the pilot studies and less top tier, and how you identify those. So the pilot studies, it might be, with the pilot study, you might think about what would be the second phase, what logically is the next step. And sometimes it might be you need to collect additional data. You need to replicate your findings. So I would try to figure out what the next logical step is for that specific research. And that way you can say, okay, we piloted it, and here's what our findings were, and then we did a full launch, or then we replicate, and then we replicate it, and the replication would be what what you really want to highlight and spend time. That way, at least you're letting folks know that you did due diligence and you're having that data out there. In terms of the type and quality of the journal. So when you identify what journal that you want to have, I would make sure that in your manuscript that you have several citations to that journal. So sometimes people don't, they submit something and they don't even cite any articles that were published in the journal. So we want to make sure that you are citing articles that are published in that journal, and that way that'll help you understand, oh yeah, we are situating we're framing our research within the debates within this journal. The way to look at whether it's a top tier journal or not is I would start looking at the impact factor of the journal. And impact, you just would have your journal, look on the journal, their website, and they'll have their impact factor. You can even type journal and then the impact factor. You can look at 5-year impact factor, 2-year impact factor. And the journals that are like 2 and above typically have pretty, those are pretty solid journals that are going to be, that are influential in the field. And if you keep getting things rejected, you might want to go to a journal that's lower than has a lower impact than a 2. At this point, you know, you're a graduate student. You don't want to, it's not like you're putting out something that is inferior or not contributing to the literature. If you really believe this is contributing to the literature, it's okay to have something published in a lower impact factor journal, because it then allows you to understand what the publishing process is. It's going to help you get a job in the long run. And if your goal is to get, to be on the tenure track, it's not going to really count toward that. So it's just kind of getting you familiar with the research process.
So for tenure, so for tenure track, only the top tier journals count?
No, they'll look at your whole, they realize that sometimes it takes a while to get published in the top tier journals. You have to collect a lot of data. So people, if you're doing something new and innovative, sometimes you have to break it, make it much smaller and break that down. And then you have to say, okay, we are going to publish this. And then you build on that over time. And as you build on it over time, you can increase the quality of the research and get it in one of those higher impact journals. But if you're doing something like you're interested, Alice, in happiness and well-being in the workplace, my sense is there might not be a ton of stuff written on that. And so as you begin to make your mark in the field, you've got to start thinking small and then build from there. Does that make sense? And
yes.
So when you get a tenure track job, they will primarily look at what you've done since you were hired, not necessarily, so these publications will get you in the door, and then once you were hired, then they'll start looking at publications since you were hired for advancement. And in order to get through the door, you need to have a number of publications. It's okay to have one in a less, prestigious journal, and then if you can get one with your advisor in a more prestigious journal or 2, that would look good. So they all can't be in second-tier journals, but some of them can be in second-tier journals. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I see that somebody has joined us. Amber, welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes. Hi, I'm Amber.
Mm-hmm.
Should I introduce myself?
Go ahead.
I'm Amber Gonzalez. I go to Fisk University. I'm a graduating senior and a psychology political science major. In all honesty, I wanted to know more about how to submit to specific journals, because I'm interested in doing like research. And as you're talking about submitting papers with your advisor. I haven't had the opportunity to do that, so I guess this is important. This is good to know that you need to do that. Yes.
Great. Amber, welcome. I'm so glad you joined the call. We've got a couple other questions that we're going to get to, Amber, and I will definitely get to this whole idea about how to submit and the importance of finding an advisor or someone who's more senior initially to help mentor and scaffold that process with you.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank
absolutely.
you. Welcome. John, did you have any other comments that you wanted before I move to the second piece of the kinds of questions that you all raised?
Well, I guess I was just thinking about, since you were mentioning about it's okay for graduate students to publish in second-tier journals. I'm just curious if graduate students have different opportunities with maybe their advisor or different mentors. How do they navigate like the priority of publishing? Like, granted, if not all students may have those opportunities, but if a student, they can have multiple publications they can work on, should they kind of prioritize the topic that's closest to what they want to build on in their future research, or the topic that probably can lead to a more impactful journal publication in order to be competitive candidate for like a tenure track position?
Okay, great. Yeah, okay, great. I think that's a great, sorry about that. That's a really important kind of point that builds on our conversation. And so, right, there is a numbers game out there in terms of being a tenure track position. I would say it would be okay to get one article or so in a high impact journal with your advisor, and it might, or with somebody else that might not be in your area of research. And so in those things, I would start thinking about, in terms of, I would look at all the projects that you're working on and start thinking about, well, where are you in terms of authorship order? So for those articles, so you want to build up your independent line of research. And for those articles that are most central to your line of research, you should try to be first or second author, you know, on those, if at all possible. And those that are publications opportunities that aren't really in your research area, I think it's okay to be like third or fourth author on those publications. It exposes you to the research process, but also typically if you're third or fourth author, you're not required to do as much work as the first or second author on the publication. And so that will free you time up to focus your energies on the areas that are at least tangentially related to what you're doing. So what I would have you do now, if you haven't done already, start really writing up your almost your research statement. And in your research statement, you'll start thinking about, here's what I want to be known for. Here's where my research is kind of going. And that will help you stay focused in terms of accepting opportunities, and also in terms of what other additional independent research that you want to do. So I would say work closely with your advisor, identify all of the opportunities that you have available, start thinking about your own research development, and start thinking about the kinds of experiences that you might need to have. Do you need experiences getting with data analysis? Do you need experiences in this area with this methodology, with that? And then start thinking about how you're able to get those types of experiences. Okay, great. The next question then kind of dealt with one that Amber talked about submitting to specific journals, working with advisor, and this was consistent with another line of research that I thought would be kind of helpful. It's like people underestimate the importance of this conceptualization of your pieces early on. So I would say, even if your advisor isn't, if you like early on when you're conceptualizing your project and your study, is to say, you know, can we have these articles, or can we have these some time out just to focus on our conceptualization, just to have conversations about where we might want to send this article, and then start reviewing those journals, and then start saying, okay, what is needed to get into this journal? So as you design the study, you are designing it for these top tier journals, and it will take a lot more on the front end as opposed to trying to do things on the back end, because when you do things on the back end, it might be too late. And so there was a question Amber had about submitting to specific journals and working with an advisor. So even if you are the first author, and even if you've done all of the work on your manuscript, I strongly encourage you to, at least early on, partner up with a more senior person. This could be someone who's published a lot, whether it's a student or a faculty person. It does not necessarily have to be your advisor, but you definitely want to keep your advisor in the loop and seek out his or her feedback. But the reason why I would say start to work on a manuscript with someone more senior is that writing is, once you get it, it's fabulous, but it's a very technical, odd kind of thing that you only really learn by actually doing it. And so if you have someone more seasoned and experienced, it could really help scaffold the entire process for you. And it would lead to, I think, greater success in the long run. So based on, what other thoughts or questions do people have? We can't hear you.
I don't know if anyone else is talking, but I didn't want to hog it all. But if no one else is going to speak up, one question I had was, you know, as a teacher, you looked at other students who might want to become faculty, I'm guessing. And I'm just wondering,
so currently
how many?
We have like a program where we share it with Crystal Bridges.
Right, it's there.
And so, yeah, actually last year is when we sent it in for the 2 years that they'll keep it. And then after those 2 years, it'll come back. Okay. But right now we really have like exhibitions on photography. Okay. So Lee Freelander took some pictures of a march that happened on 1957. And so that was a precursor to the March on Washington in the 60s. Okay. And so you get to see like a range of
there might be some background
really came together.
So it's downstairs.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, Alice, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So what I was saying was, how many, like when you're looking at other people's, you know, resumes or CVs, sorry, how many papers does an average graduate student, or like what's the range kind of that graduate students might have when they're leaving, you know, graduating and heading in addition to their dissertation?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it depends on what kind of institution you want to be at. It depends on if you want to be at a research institution or a teaching institution. Believe it or not, we have some people graduating like 10, 12, 13, 14 publications, something outrageous like that.
I wish.
I know and sometimes we get people who publish 4 articles. It depends a lot on the fit between where your training is at and what you're searching for. If you, I might also, I think people who end up getting postdocs as researchers tend to do better in the job market because they get, that's where you really, really start to learn about research. So I would say if you can get 5 publications, either in press or published, that would be good. And so if that's the, you know, if that's the case, you know, you want to start thinking about, all right, how can I be, even if you're 3rd or 4th author on some, in order to get the 5, but I think getting 5 publications would be good. You know, there's no hard, fast rule for that. If you have 2 or 3, that's okay, but you should then have things in the pike. You should have, you know, people, yeah.
How do they, what about like the paper that we weren't able to get published, we ended up giving, we were able to get it approved for a poster presentation at the ISQUALS convention, which is the International Society for Quality of Life Studies. How do those fit into the picture?
So that's great. So you definitely want to have presentations. So I would definitely say present at local and national conferences, and presentations count. They count on your CV, and it also provides you an opportunity to network. So definitely do your presentation. What I've seen sometimes, people have 15 presentations in one manuscript. And so one of the things that they say is, okay, we'd like to see this person turn these presentations into manuscripts. They want to make sure that they are investing in someone who's going to be productive and innovative and creative in their research. So if you want to, that one article, that one study, I would like to say, don't give up on your study. Don't give up on it. Put together a workshop like we talked about and see if there's a possibility of a different journal that you can get.
Since we couldn't get it published anywhere other than the poster presentation, my and my co-author wasn't willing to keep trying. We just published it, what do you call it, like open source on ResearchGate. So that one is, I don't think I could redo that one once it's already been put on ResearchGate, because it's already open then.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not.
I would have to rewrite it in some other way, right?
Yeah. I'm not quite sure if it's copyright infringement, but it sounds like that, you know, if there's ever any possibility of reworking it for another publication, I would say definitely do that. You don't want to throw away something at this early in the stage. But if that's already done, I would think about, would it be easy enough to do a similar study, but correcting whatever comments or flaws that some of the other researchers, some of the external reviewers have, and then being something published. Because the key there is you already have kind of the conceptualization, it'll be easier to write, etc. That's another thing. So I think what happens is the more focused you can be as a grad student on the kinds of work that you want to do, the easier it's going to be to write. Because what I've noticed is sometimes people are like, oh, I find that really interesting. I'm really interested in this. I'm interested in this. And then they get to have like 3 or 4 or 5 different research interests. But every time they go to write something, it means that they're reviewing an entirely different body of research. So it's important now to really start thinking about what do I want to be known for? What research do I really want to contribute? And making sure that the articles are really focused there. It's going to help you be more efficient as you move forward too.
I'm just recognizing the time because we have about 5-6 minutes left in today's conversation. So I wonder, Dr. Neville, do you have any more tips, or can you answer like maybe one more question, and we can continue the conversation next week as well?
Sure. What I can do is answer one more question, and then I could then end with some tips.
Sounds good.
Is there another question?
Oh, so I guess earlier on I asked about like what can students do if a work that we've worked with our mentor or advisor, and then because we're kind of maybe co-author, maybe first author, but then the mentor and advisor decide after a couple of rounds of rejections that this work is not going anywhere. Do you have any suggestions on what, as students, we can do in that kind of situation? Because again, we put into a lot of effort. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things might be is to say, you know what, I know we received 3 or 4 rejections. Getting things published is really important to me. I'm wondering if we can call a meeting with the research team. We can call a meeting with the research team where you and I can meet and review the feedback received. I'm wondering if I took the lead on something, if we can try just one more journal. I would just hate to give up this stress. So it would be minimal work on your part, and I would assume a lot of that and see if they would be willing to do that. And if they say absolutely not, and if you really want to push it, you could say, would you be comfortable then with me taking the lead and submitting something for publication to one more journal? And if they say absolutely not, then you have to leave it alone. So those are definitely some options.
Thank you. Those are great ideas.
So as I'm looking at some of these things, I believe that folks, there's several things. One is to apply for training opportunities so that you can further build networking and hone your skills as researchers. There's the MFP has those summer SPI kind of training. Apply for that when you see the APA MFP.
Have a good day.
Have a good day, Amber.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's like I'm currently at a manning the fort at a gallery, so I wanted to be able to see a little bit of this presentation. Let me not interrupt you.
Thanks. The other thing is, if you all also are not MFP fellows, and you might fall in that category, I might look at MFP and apply for those. I would also look to see if there are grants that you can apply for, because people are really interested in grants. So work with your advisor to say, are there internal grants that we can apply for our research that I can assist you with? Start to identify external grants that you can apply for. Begin to identify where you can get trained to do these things. And part of that is you can apply for the APA MFP. And part of that is there's like Ford Foundation has pre-doc and post-doc fellowships you can apply for. Spencer has pre-docs, fellowships you can apply for. All of these are going to look really, they're going to look as good as publications. If you're like a Spencer fellow or an APA fellow, or those are going to be as good as publications, and they're going to help support your needs. University of Michigan every year has stat training. Even if you're great at stat, that's fine. And they also have scholarships that they provide to students. I'm going to look at for the University of Michigan. I think it's their Survey of American Life. I think they have some stuff there. The other thing is, many times I think students think that they have to rely solely on their mentor or their advisor to receive research training from. That is not the model to go from. I think that you should really talk to your advisor, mentor, and say, here are the things. How can I build a team to get this? And start to identify multiple people that you can work with so that you can get trained and you can have research opportunities with multiple folks. So those are I realize it's noon now. Those are some of the tips that I have, and we'll be happy to elaborate on those next week.
Okay, sounds good. Can I have a quick follow-up question? So you mentioned about a lot of great fellowship grant opportunities, and because a lot of them are really competitive, so if we do apply and do not get the grant, would you recommend we still put that on our CV, just show as an attempt? Or like interest in applying those opportunities?
I think sometimes, you know, I might check with your advisor, and it depends. Sometimes people get honorable mention, and so if you do that, you want to have honorable mention, and that works out well. But I also think that if you say, oh, I tried this, and there's 3 kind of things that you did, and you didn't see those, then I think that might actually backfire on you. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So if it's just like one thing that you can say, you submit it, but I don't think it buys you a lot unless you're honorable mention.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Great. All right. Oh, it's really, thank you all for reserving some time of your afternoon or morning to spend thinking and reflecting on your career. And I'm really looking forward to continuing our conversation next week. Also, if people want to follow up with me or want to send me an email, we can continue to engage in these questions. My email is hneville, N-E-V as in Victor, I-L-L-E @illinois.edu.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neville, for sparing your 1 hour.
Yes, thank you.
With us too.
Yeah, thank you so much.
See you all next week, or see whoever next week. Okay, take care.
See you next week. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye.